A lot of people who are super successful, whether it's with building a business or anything that the world respects, most of those people are not normal.
You know those rare people who don't just understand the world but see right through it? Rabbi Shais Taub is one of them. He's a Hasidic scholar, a writer, and a deep thinker. But more than that, he spent years helping people navigate addiction, purpose, and faith.
When a person knows what their purpose is, and it's a purpose greater than self, then having money is great because it's an incredible tool. Anything that you're doing without money, you can do it better and bigger with money. But if you don't have a sense of purpose and what am I here for, then you would be actually much better off being poor. Content creation, it's like figure out who you authentically are and lean into that. Your natural audience, they can now find you.
His book, God of Our Understanding, reframed recovery through a Jewish lens, but its impact has gone far beyond. Even the New York Times took notice. Rabbi Taub has a way of making the complex feel clear, the abstract feel personal, and today he's bringing that insight here.
Children always want a connection to their parent, even if the parent is terrible. Your relationship with your parents affects your entire worldview. Being able to succeed and make money, it actually potentially should enhance your ability to live in accordance with your God-given mission in this world.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. HubSpot not only supports the show, but they support entrepreneurs. That's why I'm such a huge fan of HubSpot. And I'm very grateful for HubSpot for supporting the show because they help entrepreneurs. And as a fellow entrepreneur, I know it takes a lot to grow your business, a lot of audience attracting, a lot of sales, a lot of marketing, a lot of lead scoring, a lot of channel management, a lot of content, a lot of long days, late nights, a lot of weekends, a lot of wishing there was an easier way, but there is. With Breeze, this is HubSpot's new collection of AI tools. It's easier than ever for marketers, for entrepreneurs to attract audiences, to increase leads, to score customers, and to close deals fast, which means pretty soon your company will have a lot to celebrate. Visit HubSpot.com/marketers to learn more. Why do you think what you speak about hits home with so many different types of people?
First of all, as you know, when we're creating content, there's always a struggle between what you want to deliver and what you think people would like to hear. I mean, it's inevitable that we do take into account what the audience wants. And at the extreme end of that is called selling out or pandering and just, giving the audience whatever they'll click on, even if you don't believe in it, right? But then the other extreme is you're speaking to yourself, an audience of one, but it's literally an audience of one and nobody else comes looking for it. So I've tried to really try to be as close as possible to only saying things that I myself would sit and listen to. But at the same time, there is a certain amount of keeping in mind what question is someone already asking that I may be answering. In other words, I'm not changing the subjects that I speak about. I'm speaking about what I want to speak about, but the way I frame it is in a context of, well, this person is already asking certain questions. They don't know they're looking for my answer, but let's say, how do I be a better father or mother? Or how do I balance work and family? So I may have a message that I was going to say anyway, but if I can frame it as an answer to a question that someone's already asking, that seems to be like the sweet spot as far as content creation. And I'm not an entrepreneur, but in business also, that's as I understand, it's always like, what problem are you solving for someone?
No, of course. And I'm curious, when you started putting out content, was it purposely speaking to a wider audience, or were you more focused on people that were trying to learn from Torah, from religious texts? Have you thought through?
It's funny. I have so many different audiences. And I my content journey, that's a phrase that I learned from you 2 minutes ago. My content journey has been very therapeutic for me because for a while I wasn't sure, like, who am I speaking to? Is it Jews looking to study Torah, or even non-Jews, but they want to study Jewish spirituality? Or, a lot of people come to my looking for my content, or looking for when I speak about addiction and recovery, which is one of the subjects that I sometimes talk about. Or parenting is another niche that I've really become passionate about. And I'm trying to figure out, like, who's my audience? And then what I discovered, this was so, like, it was very healing for me. The algorithm does not like confusion. If the algorithm can't figure out who you are, it gets confused and it's sort of pass, move on to the next guy. So then how do you send strong signals to the algorithm that will be the opposite of confusing? So, because once the algorithm figures out, oh, that's who this guy is, then it goes and finds all the people who are your most natural audience in the world, says, come on, guys, right here, right here. Okay. So I realized I heard this quote attributed to Dolly Parton. She said, find out who you are and be that on purpose. So I figured out, it was a journey, that the magic formula to content creation is just be, in normal life, we try to dim our light a little bit for the convenience of others.
Always.
Okay. And I realized, and another topic I speak about, by the way, is neurodivergent minds. And there's an expression there, like in the autism spectrum world, of like masking, like high masking individuals who are trying to act neurotypical in the world, right? So they don't incur the wrath of some type of violation of some social code that they were oblivious to, right? So in normal life, we're like masking a lot to try to be like everyone else, because that's what works.
It feels safe.
Feels safe, right? But with content creation, it's like, no, the opposite. Figure out who you authentically are and lean into that, because now you're sending unambiguous signals, and your audience, your natural audience, you're not creating an audience, they exist, they can now find you. And it's so, like, forget about content creation. On a personal level, it was so liberating to realize, like, I don't have to be everything to everyone, but I have to be my truest self for the people who are looking for that, and they wouldn't be able to find me if I was trying to be like the rest of the crowd.
But it's interesting because you would think that the audience that's already trying to find you would be a Jewish audience. That would be the de facto audience. That makes a ton of sense. But then to counter that point, your audience has now evolved to a non-Jewish audience. So what was the thing that you leaned into? That signal.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I still speak very overtly, openly about faith, about belief. I even give text-based Torah classes where we're studying from like mystical texts in the Hebrew and translate. I mean, those don't perform as well as other types of content, but I'm saying I'm doing it all on one platform. You know what it is? Again, I'm going back to the same point that I just made about being your authentic self. It's just talking about what I'm going through. It's personal, And if I'm trying to get, how many people in the world? 7 billion, 8 billion?
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
If I'm trying to get 8 billion people, it's not going to work. But I don't need 8 billion. If I'm trying to find my audience, my market share, which already exists, but I haven't found them and they haven't found me, then really it's just about showing up every day as a content creator and being like, this is what I'm struggling with today. This was what helped me today. This is what's inspiring me today. And it sounds almost like so easy, but it's not easy because we're so programmed to want to just be what we think people want us to be. And it's so unnatural to be natural.
It's true. It's funny. It's very ironic. The angle I was actually interested in, I understand where you're coming from. The angle I was interested in, more so than you being just yourself and you tapping into an audience that wants to hear of your daily struggles. What I was curious about, I find this fascinating, is why ancient wisdom hits home so well with modern audience. Because I think that's really what you do in a very, very good way. And it's interesting because all these problems that people deal with on a day-to-day, and we were talking about this before when we were chatting about what we want to speak about, all these problems people deal with on a day-to-day, relationships, success, finances, kids, you speak about, you speak about anxiety, stress, all that.
Yeah.
It's like all been solved 1,000 times before. And I think that's a unique piece of wisdom that you tap into. Because you're not talking, there's different kinds of people that motivate, right? That you can go to the Tony Robbins of the world, but that's based on, the past 50 years of wisdom. You're tapping into something much deeper, and I think there's a lot more to what you tap into than that.
Yeah, but we're talking about the human condition, right? So like that's timeless, right? The human psyche, I would say, as God created it, hasn't changed. Technology has changed, but we're the same, and we have the same problems and same solutions. And the good old timeless wisdom is incredibly timely when you know how to apply it. And I think that's what people are resonating with.
When did you were always religious?
Yeah, I'm more or less. Yeah,
more or less.
yeah. I actually became more religious through my life.
And why is that?
Not because I wanted to, because I've found that there are some people who find spirituality inspiring, or there's spirituality versus religion. They find even religion and ritual, they find that comforting, and I'm not like that. I'm not like that. The more I live in this world, the more I need, I don't want to use cheesy words that are going to sound like hyperbole, but the more I need to be, at least for a part of my day, tapped into some plane of God consciousness, to function here in the world. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. I think that a lot of people feel that need for God consciousness, and what they do is they replace it with some other thing.
Sure, of course.
I think that's a very unhealthy modern day phenomenon. Well, not just modern day, but
no, that's also timeless. That is the human condition.
But more so than I think ever before.
We have easier access to distractions today. The human condition is that craving for distraction, but today it's just the available supply of distractions is so ample today.
One of my favorite thoughts, not favorite in a good way, but favorite in a light bulb moment way, is if there is no God in someone's life, they find another God, and that God could be work, that God could be money, that God could be.
You got to serve somebody.
You got to serve somebody.
Bob Dylan said that. You got to serve somebody. Maybe the devil, maybe the Lord. You got to serve somebody. John Lennon hated that, by the way.
Why?
Because he was an atheist.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, he says in Imagine there's no heaven. So he was very upset when Bob Dylan said that basically you're going to worship something. You got to choose.
Exactly. And I think they just sort of meander through life, and half the time they don't even know who they're serving.
That's true too.
And then they wake up. And again, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are entrepreneurs. They sort of idolize these people that have made millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. And because of that idolization, that's the correct word, they start to mimic, and they start to sort of pursue that same journey. And then I see it a lot because I have a lot of exited entrepreneurs on the show. They exit, and then there's lack of fulfillment because they were following the wrong, quote unquote, God their whole life. And it doesn't matter what version of God that is, but it's money God, it's hustle, it's whatever, it's progress, it's success.
And with an idol, you make sacrifices to an idol, which means you wake up one day and you realize how much you gave up for this false God. And that can be incredibly painful to realize what you chose to give up. And what was it for? What was it for? I mean, we all make sacrifices, but at the end of the day, or at the end of a lifetime, you want at least feel that your sacrifices were towards something meaningful.
You deal with a lot of people that I'm assuming are, for lack of a better term, looking for God to some degree.
Right. Or like you say, they may be looking for it and not knowing that because they're filling it with something else.
So what are the, you have like a, like a frontline view of all the human condition problems that people are dealing with. What are you most concerned about with humanity? Not to make it a big question.
Like, what's the big problem?
What's the big problem today that you feel that people are really seeking? I mean, you can literally find it in your most searched YouTube videos, but what are the big problems that people are seeking answers to?
What are the big problems that they're seeking answers to? I mean, obviously anxiety is big. Everybody's anxious. Everybody's anxious today. We're overstimulated. We're just simply overstimulated. Our brains were not built to take in as many images and sounds as we take in on a daily basis. That's a big thing. There's an interesting pendulum swing going on as far as families. Sometimes things fall apart and then they start to rebuild. You have to hit rock bottom sometimes. And I'm seeing in this time in which we live an incredible, it's an overlap. In some ways it's still falling apart, but in some ways it's already starting to rebuild. Focus on the strength of the family. That's a huge thing where people are not just realizing I want to spend more time with my family. That everyone knows that. It's a classic thing. Like they say, nobody regrets on their deathbed that they spent too much time with their family. Right. But more than that, it's not just spending time with your family. It's having a meaningful connection, like actually being able to teach my children, to be their guide, to be their mentor in life. Not just to be this authority figure who invokes, well, I put a roof over your head, so you have to listen to me, which doesn't work today anyway. So, and so there's a lot of stress with that because a lot of times people didn't receive in the family where they grew up, they didn't receive the tools that they need in order to be able to raise their own children. That's a big thing that people are searching for, is help with that. And it's a healthy thing that people want help with that.
Well, because I think you're going a level deeper. So when I look at family unit, I think there's already a breakdown in people seeking traditional nuclear family compared to, again, 50 years ago. So that's like level one or first thought. Second thought would be, especially in this audience, people sort of focus on, again, the wrong North Star, and they wake up 30 years in the future after building and they realize that, yes, they did have a family, but that they built a meaningful connection with it. And now they're lost and they don't know what to do, or their family's broken, or their kids don't speak to them anymore, or they're, 1, 2, 3x divorced. It's horrible, especially in like a high performing, succeed at all costs.
This is a very hostile scenario, by the way. A guy who's, let's say 60 years old, made his money, like did very well. I can think of right now 5 conversations I've had in the past 30 days with this type of guy who's like, and my kids don't speak to me. And what's it all worth?
I see it a lot. I see it even more. We're in Miami and I see it all the time. I see people that, again, are 60 years old, still going out, still partying, trying to like mask some stuff they have inside.
And they have adult kids who are
exactly
either estranged, they're just not close with them. A lot of times, by the way, I'm just thinking of people who I know, they try to bring the kids into the business, and either they try to do it and then it blows up and doesn't work, or the kid doesn't want anything to do with the business. It's an interesting dynamic as well.
I've seen more often than not, kids want nothing to do with the business. And I never understood it because that's all I ever wanted. I would love, like a dad, I love my dad very much, but I would love a dad who had a business that I could step into. My family was not entrepreneurial. That's always something that I was like, oh my goodness, can you imagine if I was like I don't mind a little nepotism. Let me take over the family business. I never had that opportunity, but the people that I do know that had that opportunity, they always seem to go in another direction. One of the first companies I worked for, got 2 kids, companies doing about $10 million in revenue, ended up selling it to private equity because his kids had 0 interest in taking it over.
No succession.
No idea why. Like it didn't compute. And I don't know what, maybe you have thoughts. Is it a broken relationship? Is it because?
I mean, it's very Clary, we talk about making sacrifices to idols.
Yeah.
So imagine you growing up in your whole life, you see your father making a sacrifice to a particular idol, and you are the sacrifice. Like he's binding you on the altar of this idol. It doesn't really foster warm, fuzzy feelings toward that business.
So for those people that do feel, first of all, there's sort of two cohorts of people listening to the show. There's people that are in that, they've made their money, and there's people that are listening to it that want to make that money and then want to have some career financial success. What is the secret in keeping a meaningful relationship?
Who do we want to talk to first? The people who did it already and they're looking back, or the people who are in the...
Let's talk to the people who did it already, because I think then we'll speak to the earlier stage, younger person, but they're going to get some lessons from learning who has already sort of screwed up a couple things.
So the people who are already looking back and questioning the priorities that they love to quit. I love that expression you said, that they were navigating toward the wrong North Star. Yeah. Because I like that metaphor, because they were navigating. They weren't just meandering, but they were choosing the wrong target. So I'm going to tell you something that could totally be misused and weaponized and by the wrong, in the wrong hands. And I'm putting it out here on a public forum, so I have no control over how this will be used, but I'm praying that nobody will misuse this information. Children always want a connection to their parent, always. Even if the parent is abusive, even if the parent is thick, even if the parent is terrible, children want a connection to their parent. Sometimes the parent is so unhealthy that the child can't have it. It's just not practically feasible. But in an ideal world, the child wishes they had it. And the proof is that even a child who's estranged from a parent for their own safety has this void. They wish they could have that connection, because a child's connection to a parent is so deep. It never goes away. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter what you've done outside of the family. We're all children. We never really grow out of that. We always want mommy and daddy. I don't mean it in an infantile way. I mean, there's just this core bond. To the extent that you see people who don't have a relationship with their parent, even when it's by their own choice, because like I'm saying, they're protecting themselves from a toxic situation. It's not just they get over it and la-di-da and they move on. There's this gaping void where they wish they had that relationship. That there's an empty space where that relationship is supposed to be. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because many, many times I've had parents who will say to me, my kids are all grown, they're married, and we don't have a good relationship. I regret a lot. Well, is there even hope? And I'll tell them there's always hope, because a child always wants a relationship with their parent. They never get over the need to have a relationship with their parent. Now, sometimes a parent has proven themselves to be so unreliable and so emotionally dangerous that the adult child is just not going to be able to trust enough to let the relationship be rekindled. But there's always hope. There's always a possibility, because children, no matter how grown up they are, never get over the need to be bonded to their parents. So I don't want to weaponize this. I don't want anyone, because you understand how somebody like cynically could misuse this information. Basically, if they could hear this and say, oh, so I can get away with murder for 40, 50 years. And then when I retire, I'll turn around and I'll go to my kids and be like, daddy's home. Like that's.
This is not what we want people to do.
But what I am saying is, after the fact, if it already happened, I've seen it firsthand, front lines. Even adult children who are themselves in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and their parents who are seniors will restore the relationship, make real amends, real apologies, not self-serving apologies. Yet not only can there be a relationship again, the craziest thing, there's so much healing that comes from it for both of them, but more interestingly for the children. Like, you'd be shocked how, I had one situation, a woman told me that her mother, a woman who I think she's in her 30s, her mother's in her 60s, her mother changed her parenting style, even though all of her kids were grown up and out of the house. And the daughter says her husband came to her and said, wow, when your mother changed her relationship with you, our marriage got better.
Wow. Even after you're fully grown.
Yeah. So I'm saying, like, that parent-child relationship affects so many other things. Like, it was affecting the dynamic in the marriage of the adult child.
You probably didn't even know it.
Of course she didn't know it. She only knew it after the fact when, oh, that was the cause and effect.
What happens in that situation? Like in that kid, what's happening when they repair that relationship? Because the kid listening to this, there's going to be some people that are going to buy into this and understand and say yes. There will also be some people that are that 30, 35, 40-year-old with a very, 40, so your parents quite old at that point. And they're like, I've gone my whole life without a relationship with my parent. There's no way I'm going to go back and try to start building that again. Now I don't see the benefit.
Unfortunately, the ball's not really in the court of the kid. This is something the parent has to do. The parent is the provider in the relationship. So they have to be the initiator and they have to make the first move. So let's say the child is grown up and says, I would like a relationship with my parent, but if the parent isn't mature enough to do it, it's not going to happen. So really it's up to the parent to make that decision that they want it to happen. But when they do want it to happen, it's so transformative. It affects so many other things. Your relationship with your parents affect your entire worldview.
Yeah. I've heard from like a doctor, he's done a lot of work with trauma research. And if you look at a household of a kid growing up and the relationship with the parent, and is that house a safe space, and does the child feel safe when they come home, and is there trauma or no trauma, that impacts performance, it impacts relationships. I mean, for like years and years and years, because what that trauma, and I'm not the doctor and I don't have the medical sources to cite this, but what he is stating is that trauma turns into this subconscious, almost operating system that's running in your head all the time. And then again, he has a formula that he tries to sort of fix that. It's what therapists would do as well. But he says this can run your entire life. He saw it with his wife, who had some sort of physical autoimmune reaction because of trauma that she experienced as a child. I think it's incredible and also very scary at how much that relationship and that home can impact.
How much impact? Because it's like, we have an effect on any human being that we interact with to some extent, and we have a responsibility that the interaction should be a positive one. But nothing compares to the amount of influence that we have on our children. Nothing. I mean, to make or break this human being, there's a unique amount of influence that a parent has in a child's life. And the ironic thing is, a lot of times when we're talking about people who are navigating toward that wrong North Star, a lot of times people get rich sort of incidentally. They weren't trying to get rich.
I think that sometimes the only way to get rich is to not try and get rich.
Yeah. Sometimes the money is just a metric. They were trying to become influential. There are different types of people, but some people, they wanted, I don't want to say they wanted power because that has a negative connotation, but they wanted influence. And the irony is that the most influence you will ever have over a human being is over your children. So you set aside that to try to influence other people. It's ironic.
It is ironic. If people are listening to this and they're just starting families and they don't want to make mistakes, what is I mean, there's a million different ways probably to build a meaningful relationship with your kids and to maintain it while still being a high performer. Because I don't want people to think that they can't achieve what they're looking to achieve in their career. And it de facto means to having a broken relationship with your kids. It's not a positive, it's not a great message, but somebody's like, okay, I want to build a business. How do I not screw this up?
I'm going to say something, and I'm not trying to convince anyone of my worldview. So if this doesn't resonate with you, just leave it. Leave it. But our livelihood comes from God. God provides for all of us, for all of his creatures. And ultimately, all we do is we hold out a cup. We hold out a vessel to receive our blessings. We don't create a livelihood. We don't create it. We think we do. It's an illusion. Our work does not create our livelihood. Our work is just a vessel within which we receive a livelihood that is coming from on high. If a person thinks that they need to work 90 hours a week in order to make whatever it is they're trying to make, they need to re-examine their entire worldview. Correlation does not imply causation. Just because you see a lot of people working 90 hours a week and who are making money doesn't mean that's how they made their money. First of all, there's plenty of people hustling and grinding and they're losing money. Second of all, there's guys making tons of money, but what are they spending it on? Anything that makes life meaningful? So it's like you might have a lot of it, but are you actually spending it on healthy, good things? And there's a lot of illusion around that when we look at other people's lives, especially you see the outside, you don't see what's really going on the inside. We have to really, really surrender to the idea that we need to make a natural effort. And by natural, I mean as opposed to miraculous. We need to make a natural effort to succeed in whatever it is we're working on, whether it's building a business or it's putting out content or writing your novel or whatever it is. That we have to put forth a natural amount of effort, a plausible amount of effort that it would require. You can't just say, I'm going to work 20 minutes a week. And that's not realistic. But then, you do the normal amount and then you have to let go and say, anything beyond this is idolatrous. This is not how it works. If God wants me to have this, he's going to send it to me. And by me working another hour, that's not what's going to create this. That's not how it's going to happen. So the first thing I would say to people to get them out of that trap where they can actually appreciate their family more is just to decouple that false cause and effect that they may be predicating their entire lives on.
I think that's a really hard idea for people to grasp. It's very, very hard. Because I fall victim to this too, even though I believe what you're saying in the day-to-day, you fall victim to. Like you fall victim to, well, I have a couple hours, after dinner. So why not send a couple more emails? And it creeps and it creeps.
And the justification is, I'll make a few more bucks for my family.
But then, so I don't have kids yet. That's, God willing, that's what we're trying to do soon. And I'm very well aware. Even, we're walking outside and I was talking about how you're booking your flights and everything. And I was saying, I don't want to travel anymore. Like I'm purposefully planting these ideas in my own head and repeating them because I know that I could speak on more stages. I know that I could go to more conferences. I know that I could do more. I literally built a podcast studio in my backyard. Like I'm very much in the mindset of, okay, I'm prepping my life, settle and have a family.
Even if that means giving up certain opportunities.
And I think it does.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing, that we have to believe that our maker knows what we need to accomplish in this world. And that if there's something that was meant for us to accomplish, my maker is going to find me. He knows my address. He knows where I am. and those opportunities will come to me without me having to run away from myself and where my real life really is.
And then when you free up that time, that's when you can start. That's like the first step, is to understand that there's some sort of, that you can actually allocate part of your life to your family. Do you feel like that's like the biggest impediment to building meaningful connections? It's time.
It's not just a time, because time allocation, like you're saying, comes from prioritization, which comes from our worldview. So, even if somebody would, I don't know, create a schedule where they would allocate a certain amount of time a day, if your heart's not in it, if your head's not in it, it's not really the same thing. You have to go back to your basic worldview. Like, where do you see yourself as influential? Where do you see yourself as accomplishing? See, this is another thing. Let's get into this. A lot of people who are super successful, whether it's with building a business or in media or anything that the world respects, there are certain things that people respect. It's funny. I don't know if you agree with this, but most of those people are not normal.
1,000%.
You agree with that 1,000%?
1,000%. I had somebody who came on here to speak about neurodivergent individuals, how most entrepreneurs have some some neurodivergent tendency, some more so than others, but it's in the majority.
So that means that, and I identify with this, so I'll speak in the first person, that we were never so successful in being normal and the regular things that regular people do. Just like when the kids go out for recess and they play together, and it's just so natural to all of them. And then there's that one kid who's like sort of on the outskirts, right? So is he going to be the CEO or the serial killer or both or what, right? But people who are super successful generally are not the people who find it easy to just be one of the guys or one of the gals, right? And then that repeats itself in the family. It's like, I don't know, like, well, where do I fit in here? And it's like, I feel kind of like, this is not my natural place, right? I go out into such and such setting and I shine. And not only do I shine, I get to be myself with no apologies because I'm so darn successful at it. People are forced to accept it, even if it's eccentric, right? But then I'm with my family and it's like, I don't know, I'm not really good at this. It's like the kid in school says, I hate math. Well, you don't hate math, you're not good at math, and therefore you hate it. So it's very easy to say, I'm not feeling super successful in this domestic thing. I'm actually feeling kind of frustrated and out of place. But then I go to my stage and I'm feeling like I'm rocking it. Well, why wouldn't I gravitate toward that?
It comes natural.
Comes natural, right? And the problem is that your life is not on that stage. Your life is in the home with the family that you're building. And anything that you're doing out on that stage is supposed to be supplemental. It's supposed to be built upon a foundation of what's happening in your core relationships. It's not supposed to become your identity.
This idea is so prevalent, and I will give you a shout out because you've actually, now you have something that actually helps parents understand how to deal with this phenomenon. You built an actual program around this because so many people have come to you, I'm assuming, with this problem. So it's obviously very prevalent.
Well, people,
the people that come to your
parenting course,
parenting course, are we describing the archetype of that person that gravitates towards this course?
One demographic, are highly successful people who don't understand why they're not succeeding as parents. Like, well, it's not rocket science. Why am I so bad at this? Right? But they're the people with enough self-awareness to be like, okay, but I'm not allowed to discount it just because I'm frustrated with it. So that's definitely a big demographic that I work with in the parenting course. But there are a few different pain points that people have when they will come to the parenting course. That's one of them.
So somebody does have to be self-aware enough to want to work on this thing.
Yeah.
That's sort of like a prerequisite. So I understand that. But when you realize that you just aren't good at the domestic husband, wife, parenting, father, mother thing, what would be sort of the first step? Like, I mean, you said you're not good at, it's not that you don't like math, you're not good at math. Well, I mean, I can start and study and I can watch YouTube videos and the podcast and I can go sit in on a course.
I don't Khan Academy and learn how to eat algebra.
Exactly.
Or you could take Shais Taub's parenting course and learn how to become a parent.
Exactly.
Plug. By the way, some of it, a great deal of it simply is education. Like you're saying, just educate yourself. Like think about people who
I
are,
don't think it's as easy. You're making it sound so easy. Hey, making it sound easy. I don't feel like, if I feel like I'm failing as a husband, as a wife, as a parent, and I'm spending 75% of my month traveling, going on stages, and I'm killing it there, that 25% that I'm home, I don't think I understand what to do.
okay, but you know what? I know I'm making it sound easier than it really is, but in some ways it is easy because success breeds success. Once you get a taste for success, and think about someone who makes their first big business deal and then they get a taste for it. Oh, I could do that. I know what that's like. Not only I can do it, I want to do it, right? So a lot of it's just about momentum. Some people have never really felt success in parenting, especially men. I got to say, like a lot of men will say, the only thing I know how to do is to provide, like financially. And like, by the way, many men will go their entire lives being 100% fine with that and saying, I don't have to do anything emotionally. I'm paying the bills. I mean, doesn't really work out very well. You can ask their kids how they feel about that. But then other men are like bemoaning that. Like the only thing I know how to provide is financial support. Why am I not connecting? Why don't my kids feel bonded to me? But it's a vicious cycle, but you can break the vicious cycle and you can get a taste of success. And and especially, I got to say, people who are successful in other areas of life, even if they don't have the skill set that's normally applied in regular day-to-day relationships, or to the contrary, that's where they're specifically challenged, but they're successful and driven people, and they know what it means to get good at something. And once they taste success at home, it becomes sort of, it starts to build its own.
Like it's on like a flywheel.
Yeah, definitely.
So to go to the other end of the audience spectrum where you have people that are just starting out. So I think what happens, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what happens is somebody's pursuing something, they're very ambitious, and then that develops a flywheel. And then they don't look back, right? And then they don't look back for
Until
30
you
years,
do.
until they do. So for somebody who's starting out, what are the words of advice that you don't fall into this trap? It's very easy when you're starting to build. You can be selfish. Maybe you don't even have a spouse. Maybe the only significant people in your family are your parents. You maybe don't have a child. So all your focus is on this one thing.
Right. But here's the thing. Well, I'll ask you. Let's imagine a guy or a woman in their 30s, young, already started to experience some success, maybe a lot of success. Let's say somebody 35 and, already making a few million a year, let's say. Someone doing well. How often is that person's identity, their self-concept, fairly indistinguishable from this success?
I think usually it's wrapped up into it. That's all they know.
That's all they know. So to me, that's the biggest issue, is that I have to know who I am apart from this thing that I've learned how to do well. First of all, these things disappear sometimes. You see that, where someone just one day whatever. They were in a particular industry that falls apart for whatever reason, for no fault of their own. It wasn't a bad decision they made. There were shifts in market, and then all of a sudden, I didn't just lose my money. I lost myself. I don't know. Who am I? I'm nobody. I don't have a self. Then other times, the person continues making money and more and more and more and more and more and more. And they wake up one day, whether they're 40 or 50 or 60, 70, 80, but they wake up one day and they're like, what's it all about? Why did I do any of this? So I think it's super important that there's a concept of identity. Who am I? Who am I? What am I here for? Now, my personal opinion is that is inherently a metaphysical and spiritual question. I know some people are not comfortable with those ways of viewing life, but once you get into the why questions, not the how. How do you do something? That's a science. Why? That's philosophy or religion. But why is it that way? Then you get into the deep ideas of like, well, what are we even here for? What is the world here for? Is there a purpose to life? And then what is my specific purpose within all of that? And those are questions that if you're really, really focused and driven, you can sort of distract yourself from having to ask those questions. But the lack of an answer to those questions isn't less profoundly destabilizing. The fact that you're not asking the question because you're distracted doesn't make the lack of an answer to those questions less destabilizing. It's still there in the background. And if anything, it's because of that void, then you double down on being super focused on the distractions, especially if you're getting reinforced by success.
Then
you have a crisis.
Then you have a crisis because either you become a victim of your own success and you never have to wake up and ask those questions at a young age. Or if you do, then you haven't asked, even you either are very successful and achieve the financial metrics and ask yourself those questions when you're like 50 or 60. Or if markets shift and business goes away and you're 35, then I think you're severely depressed because now you haven't achieved financial success that you set. And then also you have no other identity. So we have the problem. It's clearly identified. I can't think of a solution for somebody outside of just warning them that this is their path that they're going on. I mean, I think this is where reflection and closeness to family and even closeness to God, I think, is important because it forces you to focus on something outside of your business. But we are increasingly shelving those relationships. And I think that enables a distraction to a greater degree.
And what I would say to someone is, I'm not trying to tell you that your success or your business or your enterprise is bad. It's not bad. It's very good. But it's not the meaning of your life. It can be a tool, a very powerful tool for expanding your reach if you already have a meaning for your life. And to me, that's the greatest tragedy, is being able to succeed and make money. It actually potentially should enhance your ability to live in accordance with your God-given mission in this world. It should create more opportunities, more influence for good. So it's all the more tragic when not only is it not filling that role, but it becomes a distraction from your purpose in life. It's like something that has the most potential ends up becoming the most problematic, which is always the way.
You see this with a lot of people you work with, I'm assuming. Because you should tell the audience, like you were on the phone, we were talking yesterday, you're talking about some of the people that I don't know, mentor, consult, help, speak with, whatever, are friends with, they deal with like hundreds of millions of dollars, like very, very, from a traditional standpoint, outside looking in, they're successful.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about what problems do you find that it skews more towards their whole identity is wrapped up into their professional persona, or are there a select few that have found a way to remove their identity from the wealth they've created?
There are certain people, certainly people who have an independent sense of self. And those people who know who they are, like if I lost it all right now, I would still know who I am and what I stand for. Those are the people whose wealth becomes an incredible tool for amplifying their life's purpose. So again, it's interesting. There's a story in the Bible about Moses that they were taking a census, and the way that they took the census is everybody contributed a coin. So sort of like a flat tax and a census all roll into one. It's in the book of Exodus. So it describes how Moses wasn't sure what this coin looked like. So the commentaries explain that God showed him a coin of fire. Then he says, thank you. Okay. What's this coin of fire? Money's like fire. Fire is energy. Fire is a force. And if we channel it, you make a combustion engine, drive your car. You can cook your meal, heat your home. But if you don't channel it, you can burn down the whole city. You can burn down the whole world. So when a person knows what their purpose is, what their life is about, and it's a purpose greater than self, it's inherently altruistic, and I would say spiritual, then having money is great, because money is like fire. It's an incredible tool. It's energy. And anything that you're doing without money, you can do it better and bigger with money. But if you don't have a sense of purpose and what am I here for, what's my life about, then you would be actually much better off being poor. You'd cause a lot less damage to yourself and others if you wouldn't have this powerful energy in your life, because if it's not harnessed, it just starts wreaking havoc.
One thing I think is interesting, because again, we actually haven't sort of spoken too much about like God and spirituality yet, compared to what I know and you can speak about. But I want to one of the topics I think is interesting is, again, godlessness, maybe otherwise said as spiritual poverty, something along those lines that I think that a lot of people wrestle with. But if somebody's listening to you and they're like, okay, he's obviously, he's speaking to Jews, and he's speaking to people that, it's all Abrahamic religions, but he's speaking to Jews, and that's what he believes in. So I'm not for, the audience saying I'm not Jewish. I want to understand where God and spirituality fits into my life, and how do I include God or spirituality in the equation? Because I do feel spiritually poor and spiritually impoverished, even though I could be financially successful.
I would say let's keep it very simple. There has to be a purpose greater than you. It can't just be you were sent here to have a life for the purpose of you're supposed to spend that life creating the best possible life. There has to be something outside of you. There has to be something greater than you. And you don't have to fathom what that is in its totality. In fact, probably by definition, you can't. But at least you should feel a connection to that. And it should entail some mode of service. And if you're wealthy, by the way, there's so many opportunities for service. And I don't just mean charity, although charity is a huge part of it. But remember, in this society, people respect wealth. So somebody can have a lot of influence as a successful person just by what messages they get behind, just how they live their lives. People are watching you, they're imitating. So when you look at it like that, I'm here to cause a ripple effect. I'm here to improve things for the world. That to me is, in its most basic form, what I mean by a spiritual life.
You're just doing something for something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, and that it in a mode of service. I'm not here to receive, I'm here to give.
You've mentioned this theme before, and I'm curious what you mean by it, and then we can sort of move on from spirituality, because I want to speak about anxiety too. So we sort of touched on that at the beginning. We didn't go into it, but what was the way that you phrased it? You mentioned that spirituality should be medicine, not ritual. You touched on that as well.
Yeah, I have spoken about that.
I find that very interesting. What does that mean? Because I don't understand it. What does that mean for somebody who's listening, who is like, okay, I'm bought into the concept of I should be serving somebody bigger than myself. I get that. But this is an interesting point.
I think, there was a clip. I actually didn't put it out. I saw the clip. It was a podcast I recorded, actually not that far from here, in Miami area, with Ellie Nash, who has the In Search Of podcast. So we were speaking about spirituality, and I think he said something like, so is spirituality the medicine? And I said, no, it's not the medicine, it's the health. And what I meant is spirituality is not a means to an end. It is the end. It's not like I'm using it in order to accomplish something else. To the contrary, everything else in my life, when it's aligned, will bring me to a natural state of integration, which I call spiritual wellness. Right. So a lot of times people, they turn spirituality into a tool, just like, anything else. You would buy some software.
Well, even you said you don't like the ritual component. You're not doing this for ritual. You're doing it. I think you said some version of that when we first started speaking. You said, like, I think I asked you, why did you get more religious? You said it wasn't because, you remember this?
Yeah, that some people find comfort in ritual. Yeah. And I'm not denigrating ritual, by the way. By the way, that before we even started recording, I told you, by the way, when I took off from LaGuardia, it was dark. It was so early in the morning, it was dark. I couldn't say my morning prayers. And when I landed in Miami, there were no more places where I could pray with a minyan, with a quorum. So people don't realize, but I prayed my morning prayers right here. Am I the first person, by the way, to pray their morning prayers in this podcast studio? Okay, awesome.
Gino was like, is he blessing our house? I'm like, like, I don't mind.
Yes, it is a blessing for the house. So definitely I do have ritual in my life. There's morning prayers and afternoon prayers and evening prayers. But I guess what I'm saying is it's not a tool. Don't turn it into some performance enhancing tool to improve your life. It is your life. What I'm trying to say is, don't just turn your spirituality, whatever you call your spirituality, don't turn that just into another thing that is ultimately only there to bolster and reinforce me.
Because I see people that do that. We see people that use religion as a crutch. I see people that use religion as a way to network, religion as a way to build business. I mean, there's a lot of, in my opinion, incorrect ways to use religion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the common denominator of the misuse of faith, religion, spirituality is that it becomes self-serving. And inherently, spirituality is about surrender to something greater than myself. So it's the opposite of self-serving. I'm not serving me. I'm surrendering. I'm getting out of that. I'm trying to be of service to someone, to something else. So religion, faith, spirituality, yeah, a lot of times people use it to enhance their lives. It's not there to enhance your life. It's not there to enhance your life. It's there to get you, to give you the opportunity to finally, why do you want to enhance your life? Why do you want to be more of yourself? That's comfortable? You think that becoming a bigger and bigger self, that's what we're put here for? It's about becoming less and less of myself in the sense of surrendering to something bigger and becoming part of that. Self-transcendence as opposed to self-enhancement. Self-enhancement, it just becomes this vicious cycle. It's an addiction, self-enhancement.
I see a lot of it, and not even with religion, this self-improvement.
Yeah, it could be anything.
People consume.
With fitness,
Yeah.
cold plunges, retreats, or whatever it is. But it's self-enhancement, and it becomes this hamster wheel. When it's healthy, it's self-transcendence. It helps you to get over yourself. Helps you to forget about yourself in a healthy way, as opposed to distractions, which are also a way of forgetting about ourselves. But that's temporarily distracting ourselves. It doesn't really bring you to a place greater than self. It's just you're still sitting where you're sitting and just watching an interesting movie, so you're not thinking about it.
And that's the painkiller. That's a temporary medicine versus hell.
So there's always got to be something bigger than me. Every accomplishment on a personal level has to be examined within this context of what purpose does this serve outside of myself, outside of just my own personal life. It's maddening to have the only goal of your life to be for the enhancement of your life. It's exhausting.
But I think that's the majority of people.
Yeah.
You mentioned at the beginning again, you see anxiety plague a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is there a through line between anxiety and the enhancement of oneself? Is that too far of a stretch, or is there a through line there?
Oh, for sure. Self-transcendence is the antidote to self-obsession. The more focused on self we are, the more uncomfortable we are. You think about when you're lost in a good way, in like that flow state where you're not even particularly aware of yourself. Where do I end in the activity that I'm engaged in, begins. And it's just, you lose yourself in a good way. You think about that and how much peace, how much serenity is associated with that. As opposed to being in your head where you're monitoring, is the chair comfortable? Is the air too warm? Is it too cool? And are people smiling at me? Are they frowning at me? Walk in the room, it's like, who should I sit next to? Is that the most influential person to sit next to? All of that internal talk, that self-obsession of trying to get it just right, Goldilocks, right? Just right. That'll make a person very anxious, very stressful. As opposed to surrendering and just showing up and saying, God has put me in this place right now. It must be the right place. Like, why would I think about any place? Like right now, I'm sitting here with you. I guess it's theory. There are other places I could be. There are other people I could be sitting with, but that's not where God put me right now. I'm here with you. And the more I can just be immersed in what's happening here as something greater than me, it's not my agenda. It's not me coming here to sound smart on your podcast. It's like, I'm trying to just have, not have an experience, but just be part of an experience. And the more that I'm able to do that, the more relaxed I am. And if I go into my head and I start thinking, well, hold on a second, I want to make sure to say this line because I think that's awful clever, and I'll make sure that it'll make a good clip. And, then that's where the stress sets in. So absolutely, self-transcendence is the antidote to self-obsession. And self-obsession is the root of anxiety.
I just want to take a second and thank FreshBooks for supporting today's episode. Now, there are three numbers that you have to know: 30 million, 60 billion, 192 hours. What do these mean? Over 30 million people have used FreshBooks. Over 60 million invoices have been paid through FreshBooks, and over 192 hours have been saved annually using FreshBooks all-in-one accounting. If you're an entrepreneur, a freelancer, a solopreneur, if you are tired of chasing payments and drowning in receipts, FreshBooks is here to make your life easier. It's the all-in-one accounting solution that helps you manage everything from creating professional estimates and proposals to tracking time and automatically billing clients. If you need to capture expenses on the go, just snap a photo. With over 100 business integrations, FreshBooks fits perfectly into your workflow. And when tax time rolls around, everything is organized and ready for your accountant, or you can rely on FreshBooks' expert bookkeeping services. Over 30 million people have used FreshBooks, processing over $60 billion in invoices. And like I said, they're saving 192 hours annually. It's user-friendly, seamless, and offers award-winning customer service. Stop wasting your time on manual accounting. Start your 30-day free trial at freshbooks.com. No credit card required. FreshBooks is offering 60% off for 6 months. This offer is valid from January 7th till March 4th. Make sure to head over to freshbooks.com/pricing-offer. They will always have some great promotions for listeners of Success Story. That is freshbooks.com/pricing-offer. I just want to take a quick break and thank the HubSpot Podcast Network for supporting Success Story for the past few years. Now, the HubSpot Podcast Network has other incredible podcasts like My First Million. Now, if you are an entrepreneur or you are ready to turn your entrepreneurial dreams into millions, you have to listen to My First Million. It's a show that is revolutionizing business podcasting. It's hosted by Sam Parr, Sean Purry. This is a HubSpot Podcast Network original. It brings you unfiltered conversations with self-made millionaires who actually tell you how they did it. If you want to learn how Alex Hormozi built his fitness empire, or how Sofia Amoruso turned Nasty Girl into a fashion phenomenon, these aren't just success stories. They're the blueprints for your own journey to the top. Each episode breaks down the exact strategies and hidden opportunities that you can use right now. Don't just dream about your first million. Learn how to make it. Listen to My First Million wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Taylor Brands. Now, here's a wild stat. 60% of Americans dream about starting their own business, but less than 20% actually take the plunge. Now, why is that? Let's face it, building a business feels overwhelming. But what if I told you there's a way to make it simple? This is where Taylor Brands comes in, your complete business building companion. They've turned the intimidating process of starting a business into something you can actually handle. If you need an LLC, done in minutes. If you're trying to protect your personal assets, they've got you covered. They'll hook you up with everything from legal documents to licenses to permits, even a personalized business plan. Plus, their business coaching program will guide you through your crucial first 100 days. And the best part is you get all the tools you need to build your brand, manage your invoices, handle your bookkeeping, basically everything you need to launch with confidence. And there's an exclusive deal for all Success Story podcast listeners. You get 35% off when you visit taylorbrands.com/podcast35. Don't let your business dreams stay dreams. Get started today with Taylor Brands. Now, how do you balance that thought with performance? Because at the end of the day, we still have to perform.
Yeah. And when you say perform, you mean to
No, not put on a mask. I mean to
results.
Results, yes.
Right. You have to show something.
You have to show something. So I could sit here, I could have, 5 or 6 drinks, and I could be very relaxed. The podcast would probably, or maybe it would be better. I don't know.
Right. See, I think this is one of the great misunderstandings. Like I was saying before about people who feel like their output is linked to their success, and they turn that into an idol. So similarly, this may be a bridge too far for many people, But I don't think we have to be so obsessed with performance. By performance, yeah, I don't mean putting on a mask. I mean by showing results. When you're doing what you do, when you're doing what you're naturally good at and enjoying it and losing yourself in it and doing it for a purpose that's ultimately greater than yourself, awesome results are natural. It's almost effortless. I can tell you in my own life that there are things that I worked so hard on, and either I barely accomplished them or I didn't even accomplish them. And there are other things that I was just having a good time and it was wildly successful. So I think we have this misconception that that there has to be stress and strain in order to be serious about accomplishing
I
things.
think a lot of people believe that. I try to not believe it, but I'm lying to myself if I think that I never believe it.
If you're doing what you're gifted at. Now, by the way, I'm a strong believer in, when I spoke before about you have to know yourself. One of the things I believe in is knowing your strengths and leaning into them. I've spoken about that. I said, find out who you are and do that on purpose. If you're doing what you're gifted at, it really shouldn't be stressful. Now, when we're trying to be something we're not, because for whatever reason, we think that that image is a desirable, a lot of times it happens when we're very young. We see a certain image of success or what we in an immature state of mind consider to be success. And then we like make this contract with ourselves when we're like 5 years old. Then you wake up and you're 30, you're like, am I still trying to satisfy a 5-year-old's idea of success? I don't even like this. This is not even me, right? Happens all the time. But if you're really doing what you're gifted at, you can accomplish without straining. By the way, this is a total aside and might seem like a non sequitur, but I'm a big believer in hiring experts and paying them disproportionately for their time. And what I mean is this. I don't care if you took 5 minutes to write that ad copy, whatever it is. I want the guy, when he's doing that job, he's in his most natural state. Like that's his place of natural, relaxed self. And I don't care if he's able to, and by the way, a lot of people have imposter syndrome about it. They'll be like, but I didn't even work at it. Now it took me 5 minutes. Yeah, but I can have another team spend 5 hours or 5 days on it. They'll never be as inspired as what's coming out of you. So I'm a big believer in finding people who are really gifted at something and just like let them do it, let them shine, let them flow. And I'm a big believer in doing that for ourselves. And if there's something that I'm not good at, delegate that. Hire someone to do that. Like really, if you want to go to the next level, you should only be doing the things that you do almost effortlessly. It's counterintuitive because we think there's got to be the grind. But the truth is, you want to go to the next level, your genius is going to come out effortlessly. And if there's things that are hard for you, hire the person who it's not hard for.
How do you find those things?
Well, one problem is that we spend a lot of time trying to be something for other people that we lose touch with those things. Like it should be the most natural thing in the world to know what my gifts are. But we spend so much effort trying to put up this avatar that we lose touch with it. I think, well, I have a theory about this actually. Want to hear my theory about this?
I'd love to.
This is a theory I have. When you're young and whatever dysfunction there was in your home, you want to make yourself feel safe. And so you pick something that works. So one kid learns how to become invisible. Another kid learns how to fight, the one screams at the parents. Another kid learns to be the comedian, diffuse everything, crack a joke, Another person learns to be the philosopher, he intellectualizes it. Another kid learns to be the diplomat, tries to make peace. And then that becomes your thing. Because that's what you learned how to do when you were 5, 6 years old and you were just trying to cope with the dysfunction of your family you grew up in. And you become really, really good at that thing. Like awesome at that thing. The problem is that thing that you're the best at is also your undoing, because it's an obstacle to intimate relationships. Because if your go-to, let's say, is crack the joke, that's what worked when I was a kid. And then you're trying to have an intimate relationship where you're trying to be genuine, but anytime there's any amount of stress, your go-to thing is crack the joke. And then the person who's trying to get close to you will be like, can you not crack a joke? And the answer is kind of like, well, no, I can't not crack a joke. Like, this is, if I'm to be honest, like, if I don't have this tool, then I'm terrified, because then I'm back as a little kid, scared that the world's blowing up and I don't know how to feel safe. So those things which become our greatest strengths become our greatest undoing. Now, a lot of times people will find success with that thing. They'll monetize it. They'll turn it into an image. They'll turn it into a brand. And then there's a lot of reinforcement for it. And then it's almost impossible to walk away from. Almost impossible. Even if it will destroy all of your real relationships, it's almost impossible to walk away from, because you're just getting so much reinforcement for it. I see people like this all the time. A lot of celebrities, by the way. Like, the person with the most seemingly extroverted personality and in real life is completely lonely. So what do? You come to a point where you're like, okay.
Because I actually, just one more thought before you keep going. I think that what actually ends up happening, I love that theory. I think it's probably very accurate. But I think what actually happens, is makes a lot of sense, is you actually start to believe the hype. You believe that that's the thing that you actually should be doing, because you get all this reinforcement. So now you are not even listening to your subconscious anymore. Your conscious is saying, yes, that's you.
Correct. Right.
There's a lot of things you got to unwind there.
Right. Okay. So then let's say it all blows up. You hit bottom. And now you basically say, you know what? I have no idea who I am. I have no idea who I am. And by the way, that's the most profoundly spiritual experience you can have, is when you hit bottom and you say, everything that I developed in order to succeed in life has ruined my life. And now I'm free falling. I'm letting go of it all. And if I think I establish my brand, I'm being the smartest guy in the room, I'm dropping that. I'm not doing that. I know that was my go-to thing. I know that was the thing that I did as a bid for security. I can't do it anymore. I'm letting go of that. What am I now? I don't know what I'm at. I don't know. I don't have a sense of self. I'm clay in the hands of the potter at this point. And that point of just surrender, of like, just use me, God. I don't know what I am. I'm here to show up with no agenda, with no proclivities, with absolutely no opinion. I'm just showing up. And then what happens, if you can reach this point, is that God will give you back those skills, but it'll be on his terms. And you'll discover that thing that you spent a lifetime perfecting, you really are good at it. And you really ought to be using it. but no longer as a tool to serve yourself. You no longer serve himself because you've surrendered. You've already accepted, God, do whatever you want with me. But you happen to also be good at that thing. But now, instead of using it because you have to, because you feel you have no choice, almost like a compulsion, now you get to use it with free choice. You get to say, you know what? I happen to know how to do such and such. Let me use this for a cause greater than myself. That's where your real life begins, so to speak, is when you go back to all the stuff that you were using as a tool for your own safety and security. You've given that up because you say, my safety and security comes from the fact that I'm surrendered to a power greater than myself. I'm no longer trying to make a bid for my own safety and security. Oh, but I have these talents. I have these skills. Now let me just use them for the greater good. And that's where your second life, so to speak, your real life really begins, where you can go back and use these skills, but without them using you, without becoming a slave to them, without idolizing them.
I was going to ask, do you feel, and it makes a lot of sense, that's an incredible journey that somebody could in theory go on, but do you feel like many people ever go on that journey?
Very few people will go on this journey, let alone complete it. But those who do will find themselves, their true selves. Look, I'm sitting here, I'm talking to you. I basically, thank God, I guess I'm lucky that I don't have a normal 9-to-5 job. I don't have to go do anything that I don't like doing to make a living. I basically just get to talk and say cool things.
It's just trying to do the same thing.
Okay, so then you know what I'm talking about. So tell me if you relate to this.
It does relate to me.
I was good at talking since I was a little kid, but I did it because it was my way of feeling safe. Because when the kids were behaving in ways that confused me, and I didn't understand why I was not fitting in or why something was happening, people were like jockeying for social position, and I didn't know how to secure my position. And the only tool I had was to speak and to say something witty or profound. And then the only way that I found of getting notice, of getting approval, was, again, pearls of wisdom. That's what gets it, right? And that becomes an addiction. And then it becomes a false self. And it divorces you from your true self. And it becomes your undoing. And then you have to walk away from it and say, I will never do this again if this is not what God wants for me. And then what happens on the other side of that, God is like, good, I'm glad that you surrendered that. By the way, you do know how to talk. So I would like you to talk, but not for yourself anymore. I want you to talk for me.
I've never really thought about my own journey to that degree. I mean, I'm fortunate that I do this for a living now, but I'm trying to think. I guess I use talking to make money and sales, marketing, that you talk to make money. And then there was a point where I didn't have to do it anymore, but then I started to enjoy it, but it wasn't forced. So when I started the podcast, it was not forced. It was just fun. Maybe I'm simplifying your thought too much. I don't mean to do that.
No, you can never simplify too much. If something is true, then it should.
But I used to force myself to be a good, not just speaker, but question asker, because that's what made me money. Right? That's what happens in sales. You ask enough questions, you get to the end result. You get to the root of the thing.
When did you learn how to ask questions?
I've always been very curious.
Yeah. Where did that come from?
I don't know where that came from. I don't know.
Far back as you can remember?
Yeah.
When did you discover? Tell me about an early memory where you discovered, hey, if you keep asking people questions, you get somewhere.
It was probably to get what I wanted out of my parents.
How old were you?
6, 7, as young as I can possibly remember. Because when they said no to me, I would ask a million questions to try and uncover the logic in them saying no, to the point where they caved. And it's probably a negative. It's not a great. It is what it is. Doesn't matter. But
it's a skill that you discovered in trying to negotiate the situation in your family of origin as a child. And then you realized that you could expand that and you could do it with other people and in other situations.
And I found that actually the more questions I asked, it was strange to me, but people always said that I seemed very compelling. I had a lot of influence, but I never felt like I was imposing my thoughts on people. I felt like I was always asking and understanding them better so that I could understand what they want out of me. And then I would deliver that, because coupled with the question asking, I think I was always a yes person. I was a people pleasing person. I always felt like I had to please people. Probably also coming back to like my parents and as a kid. So I always wanted what I wanted, but I never wanted to disappoint them at the same time. Anyways, and then it morphed into a career.
Okay, so you realized you had this skill.
Yeah.
And you realized that it has a lot of different applications, which can be monetized. And you did it, and did it well, and were well compensated.
Very much so, yeah.
And it got to a point where I don't know if you can try to remember the time where it became at what point was this skill would it have been the hardest to walk away from?
My entire professional life.
Your entire.
But yeah, I mean, there wasn't a single point. It was like, that's how you make money.
Right. So now
I would have had to, in my mind.
So it's not free choice.
No.
You're stuck.
Yeah, it's golden handcuffs with this skill.
Golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when it becomes the prison. And now it bleeds over into your personal life. Like, when do I turn it off?
I don't think I ever turn it off.
So I literally never turn it off.
In fact, it's gotten to the point, I don't think there's always a clear point of delineation either. So now in my work, I'm fortunate that I can do this for a living, and I didn't have to worry about money when I started the podcast. So I did do this for fun. But even in my like social interactions, like when I'm going out and people are going to listen to it, oh my God, I bet Scott's not fun to go out with, but stay with me. Like, I don't like small talk. I can't stand small talk. So when I go out, I like to ask questions and get deep questions. Doesn't matter if I'm sober, going out for a drink. I hate small talk.
How's the weather?
I can't stand talking about the weather. I can't stand it. And a lot of people are just happy with having small talk and casual conversation. To me, the second it's small talk, casual conversation, I'll pull up my phone. I'll be bored. I don't want to be part of this anymore. And the people that I enjoy spending time with are the people that don't mind going deep on topics.
What's the meaning of life?
Okay. Maybe not always that deep.
I want to map this out. How you went from this skill that you discovered as a child when you were badgering your parents, which then you started to realize had other applications. Then you realized it made a lot of money. Then became golden handcuffs that you could not walk away from. It was no longer free will.
I mean, I still technically haven't walked away from it.
But you're telling me you've come to a point now where there is a certain amount of joy and play.
A lot of joy and play in what I do.
So I want to map that out for people, because, this journey you're describing, well, I described it, and then you labeled it, you called it a journey. And I said, very few people do it. Sounds like you've done it, or at least in part,
Right. I don't want to ever
we're all works in progress, but I'm saying this thing that you do, we all have that thing that we do, right? You could have remained in the golden handcuffs mode for the rest of your life, where it becomes a compulsion and you literally can't walk away from it because the stakes are too high. And also because it becomes your identity, and like, who would you be without it? And so you're stuck. There's no joy. There's no play. It's just slavery. And you came to a point now where you're able to do this thing that you do, but you do it without compulsion.
Right.
Let's map that, because
so I'll tell you. So
I know the pattern because I've seen it every time.
So let me tell you.
I want to hear if your story fits the pattern.
So the reason why. Okay. So the reason why I chose to do this for a living, it makes a little bit of money with ads and whatnot. I mean, it's not. I could have gone and tried to build another company or gone to work, and I could have done that. But the reason why I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to focus on doing something that had a little bit more joy attached to it, was because in my mind, this also led to good lifestyle where I can now spend more time with my family. So I saw a lot of negatives associated with using this skill in like the way that I've done it for the past almost 15 years, I saw a lot of negatives associated with that. And in my mind, I said, the next dollar or the next comma in the bank account is not worth the sacrifice based on what my priorities are. And that's why I decided to do this for fun, because I wanted to focus on something that was more meaningful to me than the next comma, next X million dollars.
So you made a deliberate decision.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so.
I think that if people are like listening to your story and are inspired by it, which I think, by the way, many people will be, because this is a great thing. Most people wish they could be doing something they enjoy. And you're doing what you enjoy. So I just want to describe what it is that this journey entails. The very same thing that was your adaptation as a child, was your coping mechanism, your defense mechanism, and then became your identity, and could have become a literal enslavement. You were able to jump tracks and bring that thing with you and use it for something bigger than you, meaning this vision you have of what a truly meaningful life is. And I think that this is a really important message, because all of us have that thing, or maybe sometimes more than one thing, but at least a thing, that if we continue to do it as a compulsion, if we do it as a defense mechanism, it rules us. But if we can surrender to a greater vision, a higher vision, a more lofty, more noble idea of what life is about, and say, no, it's not about another comma in the bank account, like you call it. What we discover is that thing has noble uses that will not only make us happy, but will make the world a better place.
I believe I'm very fortunate, because I think that I'm living, like you mentioned, what most people would want in their life is to do something they find fun and enjoyable. But also I do believe that almost everybody on this earth, if they had the means to, would enjoy teaching their lived experience and other people's lived experiences to people that are struggling. I think that humans are genuinely altruistic. And I mean, I'm trying to do it at scale with the podcast, because I wish that there were shows like this and conversations like this when I was young, 19, 20, and I could listen to and sort of get a better, and there probably was, it just wasn't clocked into them. But that's really why I wanted to do it. I've always loved teaching. I've always loved helping out people. My first job ever was coaching kids at tennis. So I've always enjoyed sort of giving back. And that's where, and then I don't know if I fit the first description you said was when everything falls apart and then you give up, and then.
Yeah, it sounds like you didn't have to have such a big crisis.
I didn't have a huge crisis for this. You mentioned it. I jumped.
Tried a decision.
Yeah.
You made a choice.
Now, I don't know why I did that.
You're lucky. Most people don't. Most people, everything falls apart, and then they begin that second life. But the fact that you were able to do it as a calculated choice, and to say, you know what, I'm on a certain track. That's not the track I want to be on.
I think because I've been overexposed to people that have gone down.
You learn from other people's mistakes. You've seen enough of those tragedies. So it was crisis. It just wasn't your own crisis, which means you're very lucky, because you didn't have to go through it yourself. But let me ask you a question. You've seen people who were super successful and miserable.
A lot.
Question for you. From the people, or have you seen people who came through that crisis, came out the other side and found meaning?
Yes. And I know people that are going through it right now.
People who are going through that transition.
Sold companies for hundreds of millions of dollars and are going through it right now.
Okay. So I would say to those people, that what you will discover on the other side of the crisis is in some ways not all that different than the you that you're abandoning. In as much as you will have the same skills, you'll just be free to use them for something greater. I'll tell you a story, cute little story, parable. There's a guy driving in the car. He's miserable. He hates his life. And he's not religious, but at that moment, he utters a prayer and he says, God, I hate my life. He's driving on the interstate. He says, God, I hate my life. I want a new life. All of a sudden in the car, he hears the voice of God. God says, you're in luck. I've got a new life for you for a very reasonable price. The guy says, what's the price? God says, how much you got on you? He said, $20 on me. God says, oh, perfect. The price of your new life is $20. The guy says, God, if I'm giving you the $20, you see the gas is going low in the car. I'm going to have to put gas in the car soon. If I give you the $20, I'm not going to have money for gas for the car. God says, oh, the car, that's right. Yeah, price for your new life just went up. That's $20 in your car. He says, if I give you my car, how am I going to get to work in the morning? God says, oh, you have a job, gainfully employed. Price for your new life is I want your $20, I want your car, I want your job. He says, if I give you my job, how am I going to pay the mortgage? Oh, homeowner. Yeah, okay, price for your new life now has gone up to $20, your car, your job, and your house. He says, I give you my house, where are my wife and children going to live? Wife and children, very good. Price for your new life is $20, your car, your job, your house, your wife, your kids. The guy at this point realizes he better shut up because every time he speaks, price is going up. So God says, all right, I'm about to give you a new life, but before I do that, I want to know if you can do something for me. The guy says, He doesn't want to speak. He's afraid to speak. God says, okay, see this $20? It's not your $20, my $20, God says. But I want you to spend it. But because it's not yours, you don't buy what you want. You buy what I want. Can you do that? The guy says, God says, you see this car? You used to have a car just like this. You don't anymore. It's my car, God says, but I want you to drive it. But because it's not your car, you only drive it where I want to go. You see this job, God says, not your job. It's my job. You show up every day there and you do business the way that I want business done. See this house? It's not your house, God says. It's my house, God says. I want you to live in it and I want you to treat it like the house of God. You see this wife and children? They're not your wife and children, God says. They're my wife and children. I want you to treat them that way. Can you do this for me? The guy says, God says, great. Then here's your $20. Here's your car. Here's your job. Here's your house. Here's your wife and kids. And here's your new life. What's the difference between the old life and the new life? It's the same stuff. It's just a question of how you're using it. The old life is mine. I was using it for me. And I was caught in that loop. The new life is same stuff, but I'm free now. It's not mine. It's all part of service. It's all part of the bigger picture. It's all part of what I can give back. Same stuff.
We started this conversation speaking about anxiety. And all of a sudden, when you frame it the way you frame it, I think this solves a lot of the anxiety problem because you're not concerned about self anymore. That's a very long answer to why is there so much anxiety? It's because of self-serving.
So when we have opportunities such as material resources or human resources like good network or a good name, a good brand, good reputation, we can become enslaved to those things and live in fear of losing those things and live as slaves to the grind of maintaining those things. Or we could say, none of that stuff belongs to me anyway. I'm just a steward. How can I use, as long as I have access to those things, how can I use them to accomplish something bigger than me?
You mentioned something. about shifting the perspective of, hopefully this will resonate. It's a little bit of a, I guess, I mean, all these conversations have been relatively deep, but this is an interesting thought. So you mentioned how ownership moves from you owning all these things and serving yourself to God, really owning these things. And these are just things that you really have on lease from God, and you're meant to serve a higher purpose. Where does God fit into someone's life? And what I mean by that is, when you are, especially in a family unit, where does God fit into the relationship between your wife and your children? Who do you serve first? Is it God, or do you serve your wife first, or do you serve your kids first? Because that's also, I've heard people confused about this.
Because some people claim they're being holy when they're using God as their excuse for mistreating other people. So you see a lot of times where, let's say, a family relationship will suffer, and it's because somebody is claiming the moral high ground. Well, it's a holy war. God told me that I have to, have to do this. And what do you say to someone like that? God told me. When somebody once they're invoking the God card, there's very little you can tell them to talk them down.
And I say it in the context of family, because I think this is probably it could be in context of business too, where people say, oh, God told me to do this or do that to that person.
And I don't literally mean someone saying the voice of God.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Right. But more like moral high ground of, well, this is the right thing. And, it's such a misappropriation of the whole concept of having an absolute value system, of having an unmovable sense of right and wrong. It's not, a person who has a real sense of morality is not supposed to be more rigid. They're supposed to be more flexible. When you're working for God, when you're a steward, when you're in a mode of service, then sacrifice comes easily. So the holiest person is the person who's the most flexible, not the person who's breaking others. You want to be tough with yourself, be exacting from yourself. But real spirituality, as opposed to feigned spirituality for the purposes of self-aggrandizement, is about tolerance. You see, people who use their moral position to condemn others,
ostracize them. I mean, even in, you see it in doesn't matter which religion, any very religious group, and they have a family member or a community member that's not as religious, it's not a fun relationship.
Right. And then they claim the moral high ground, but the reality is it's just coming from fear. You're afraid somebody's challenging the power structures, and therefore, you bring down pressure on them to try to get them to conform or to squeeze them out, because you're afraid they're going to destabilize things. So the story is all this time. So, and that gives people of faith a bad rap. Yeah. So what I would say is, like, if you're listening to this now and you are becoming more spiritually aware, more spiritually conscious, you are trying to live a more God-centered life, I would say one barometer that you can use to see if you're truly growing in your spirituality is if your relationships with other people are becoming, if your treatment of them is becoming more compassionate, not less. Everyone's got a story. Everybody's got a story. And the more you can live from a God-centered place where we're all put here for a purpose, we all have a unique and wondrous and wonderful story, the more you can look at people that way, I think the more space you have in your mind for them, as opposed to like, you don't fit into the reality and you make me uncomfortable. Your existence makes me uncomfortable. Yeah.
I've always thought about that. I think that's one of the the ranking of God in your life and where God fits and how that affects your relationships with others. That's always been interesting to me. I think that's something because we have two opposite ends of the spectrum that we've spoken about. We have people that have no spirituality or spirituality impoverished, and there's a lot of godlessness, and there's people that include God, but then almost to the detriment of the relationships with other people.
Or to the detriment.
Or to that.
Well, it is to the detriment of
And I think that I don't know why. I'm not smart enough to know why we always default to extremes. Maybe you have experience as to why we always default to extremes. But I just want to leave people, after this conversation at least, with some sort of map or guide for how to operate with spirituality, but in the right way, kind of like what you were alluding to, the barometer for whether or not you're adopting spirituality properly. It's interesting. Adopting spirituality properly, yeah.
100%. There's a right way and a wrong way. Probably many wrong ways. It's always dangerous to have the moral high ground, because the human tendency is to weaponize that. And once you're using it to feel superior to others, it's definitely, you don't have it. You lost it already.
I've noticed it sometimes when people commit their life to a new thing. We can talk about
whatever it is. Doesn't have to be religion.
No, it's definitely not always religion.
Right.
So have you ever seen somebody who's worked out for the first time?
Yeah.
And they go back to the gym, they go on all these diet programs, they're Ozempic or whatever, and they lose weight. My goodness. They become insufferable for...
Correct. Right. They yeah. Somebody who used to be really heavy, let's say, that's the example you're giving, and they lost a lot of weight, they are more likely to be the guy come over and say to you, you need to lose weight. Like, excuse me, like, you're coming, I know that. You don't have to point that out to me. Like, what? This is so inappropriate, right? But yeah, they feel they have this license now. And let's talk about, again, the idea of your thing, whatever it is, that thing that you do, ultimately is meant to be used for service. There's a thin line between, let's say your thing is you were really bad at something and then you mastered it and you had a breakthrough, okay? So you're really unhealthy and then you became healthy, or you were really bad with money and then you became really good with money, whatever it is. There's a very thin line between coming back with a vengeance and then just sort of like condemning everyone else who's not yet good at that, or coming back as a teacher and saying, I know the pain. I'm no better than you. I'm just further along in the process than you. There's a thin line between those two, but the experience of it is night and day. The guy who comes to you and because I had a problem and I fixed it, and instead of feeling grateful, he feels entitled now to have the loudest voice about that issue. Nobody wants to be coached by that person. But the guy who comes to you and says, dude, you're not so bad. I was much worse. and there, but for the grace of God, go I could still be much worse. I'm blessed. I'm really lucky. And I can share with you some of the things that happened for me, and maybe they can happen for you. Like, wow, everyone wants to be coached by that guy. What else do you want to talk about?
I got one more thing. I didn't know if you. I got one more.
No,
I didn't know if you had another thought on that. That's it.
no, I'm just here.
The last thing that I thought was very interesting was the ideas of legacy, of mortality, especially for people that are trying to build a legacy. Is this a useful thing to build towards, or is this a waste of time? And I guess legacy I tied into mortality because ultimately it's about thinking about what happens after you die. Should you be thinking about what happens after you die, or should you be using your mortality as a tool, almost through a stoic philosophy, to accomplish as much in this lifetime as you possibly can and not really concern yourself with what happens after you die?
Woody Allen said, some people try to achieve immortality through their work. I would like to achieve immortality through not dying.
That's good.
Yeah. The answer to this question is the same as everything else we've speaking about. Are you using it to serve self or to serve something greater than yourself? Because listen, there are people who their legacy is just one more self-serving project. It's their ultimate and final self-serving project. I'm going to put my name on that hospital, right? Or on that university or on that aquarium. And it's just one more bid for self-enhancement. And I guess you're giving money to a good cause. Other people are benefiting from it. So I guess it's not all negative, but you think that satisfies your soul in heaven? I don't think so. If it's not satisfying to live that way during your lifetime, it's not satisfying to live that way after your lifetime. Forget about legacy. Think about service. What is going to accomplish something that will continue to reap dividends after you're gone? Think about it very simple in terms of ripple effect, expanding the influence, maximizing or amplifying the effect. You put your name on it, you don't put your name on it. Okay. What difference does it make? That's not legacy. Legacy is not your name is on something. Now, sometimes it's good to put your name on something because it encourages other people to give, because it arouses a little
That's a different
competition. Yeah, by the way, I've told donors in situations where people wanted to be anonymous. And sometimes they want to be anonymous for very legitimate reasons.
But that's also like the highest form of a charity.
Yeah, the Maimonides 8 levels of giving, right? Where the giver and the recipient don't know each other, right? So, and that's, by the way, when you're talking about, let's say, a pauper, a poor person who, let's say, is having their food paid for by somebody. So it's better that the giver and the recipient don't know each other. But let's say you're funding an organization, okay, where there's no embarrassment in recipient receiving from you, but there's a certain humility in being anonymous. However, and I've told donors this in the past, I'm telling you, if I put your name on this donation, if we put your name, I know there's another guy who's going to give. So your money, your X amount, your 100,000 is really going to effectively be 200,000, because so-and-so is going to see it and not want to be left out. And in that case, take the hit for the team and put your name on it, because it's going to end up bringing in more money for the cause. But yeah, it's not about your name being on something and people knowing that it's you. It doesn't matter if people know that it's you. If you want legacy, then figure out how to set something up that's going to be, I'll call it passive income, where you can die and it's still doing good. You don't have to run it. That's legacy. So the more opportunities you have, the more resources you have access to, the easier it is to set that up if you're strategic about it. You know what's funny, by the way? I've dealt with two types of philanthropists, and they're about equally distributed, about half and half. There are philanthropists who give charity with the same business acumen as they make money. They're very prudent how they invest their charity. And then, like, another whole half of philanthropists who it almost seems like once they're not in the business mode, once they're in the charity mode, they're like at the roulette table in Vegas. It's like such wild abandon, irresponsible, no accounting. It's bizarre.
That's strange that if you made that money, you think you'd have the same due diligence where you invested, or
It's almost like that's where they just splurge it irresponsibly.
yeah.
And they don't see results from it that they can be proud of.
I mean, it seems like common sense that you would adopt the same level of scrutiny.
Yeah.
But common sense isn't common, so whatever.
Sure. I have a theory about a lot of things, but I would encourage people that if you do have a foundation, if you're in a position to be strategic about your giving, that you should think about the ripple effect. Think about something that is going to be here forever, not just fly by night.
I think that's fair. I guess that sort of ties into the second thought. I mentioned mortality and Stoic philosophy, which is really just understanding that at some point you're going to die, but it still ties back to the same fundamental principles you're talking about. I mean, yes, it's important to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, but if you're doing them for the right reason, then I think that'll just add another layer of motivation onto them.
Look, you don't need more money than you need, and you don't need more time here on this earth.
We didn't even talk about that, about needing more money than you need. And
Could talk about it.
And it was a conversation actually that came up the other day with somebody who's worth just a little bit shy of $500 million. And he was saying how he doesn't understand why people want to become billionaires, and how most of the billionaires that he knows are all very unhappy people.
Right, because the guy's worth $500 million, and if he wanted to, it's very reasonable, and he could make that his goal.
But he decided not to. And decided to.
Because,
well, I don't want to speak on his behalf.
Okay, well,
but from the story that he told me, he was in Israel on October 7th, and I can't remember which part of Israel, but it was a part that it didn't normally have rockets flying over it, and there was like rockets, and the Iron Dome was exploding. The rockets right above his condo, and his wife was like, "This, we don't need to be in this part." She's like, Israel, but also let's focus on family. And he had his daughter there as well, and they just moved to Aventura. They just moved to Miami, and he said, like, I moved to Miami, and I could have been in a position to get into something that would have made me a billionaire in about 5 years. And he's like, I just made the decision that I don't want to be traveling anymore. It's like he didn't feel safe as a Jew going all over the world like he used to, and he doesn't need it, and he has family, he has kids, and he's like, you know what? I just want to be happy.
It takes a lot of guts.
Yeah. But he also sees all of his billionaire friends, because that's who he works with, and they're not happy. And he sees a lot of people that are making $60,000, $70,000 a year that are exceptionally happy. He's a smart guy. Puts two and two together.
Right. Yeah. So, we talk about that thing that you do. So I learned how to be eloquent, talk my way into things, talk my way out of things. And you have a similar thing, the questions, the probing questions. And then, like I said, other people learn how to be bullies. Other people learn how to be comedians. Other people learn how to be peacemakers. some people discover that that thing they do plugs in very well to making tons and tons of money. So the question of how much money is enough is not the real question, because it's not about the money. It's not about how much money. It's about, this is my thing. I can't stop doing my thing. So it's a misnomer to even assume that there's an amount that would constitute success, because it's not about success. It has the look of achieving success, but it actually is not. It's about a compulsion. How can I step away from this? What will I be? Who will I be if I'm not doing this thing? And what feelings will I suddenly start feeling when I'm not distracted from my own feelings by constantly doing this? So somebody who's not comfortable with themselves, there's no amount of money you could achieve that allows you to step back. It's like you're on that hamster wheel and it's going too fast and you cannot get off. So this goes back to where we started, which is we need a sense of self that's greater than just, I'm here in this life to enhance my life. There has to be a self-concept that's tied to something greater than me.
We've gone through a lot. What would be an idea that I didn't ask you about, that's something that you're struggling with right now, something that is sort of top of mind for you that we didn't go into?
Biggest thing I'm dealing with right now, I've been dealing with my whole life, but becoming more and more aware how important it is to me, and finding out it's important to others as well, is this whole weird condition of embodiment. That the soul existed long before you were born. It will exist after you pass. And we're having this, what is it? We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So we're having this embodiment experience. And for many of us, it is inherently traumatizing. To be a spiritual being confined to a physical container is, for most people, it's not deeply disturbing, but there are certain sensitive souls for whom it is deeply disturbing.
I think that some people just don't think about it.
Right. Or they get so deeply immersed in distraction that they can avoid it. They can kick the can down the road, so to speak. So, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, about what is the soul in this world in a body for at all? And there's a purpose. There's a greater purpose. We were not sent to this world to torture us. But conversely, we weren't just sent to this world in order to eat ice cream and have a good time. Like, that can't be what it's all about. We were sent to the world for a purpose greater than ourselves, which is to make the world a better place, to make this physical plane the most refined, most lofty, most holy plane of reality, to make the physical world holier than heaven. And we have the ability to have a part in bringing that about. And it's all by doing things that refine the embodiment experience. So specifically, one of the things that helps to integrate the soul in the body is showing up in physical places. We could have done this through Zoom, but we're sitting in the same physical location. We lost a lot of that after the COVID lockdown. It's very important to show up, to bring your body. Nowadays, it's easy to FaceTime people, easy to send a text, but you're in a body for a reason. Bring your body. Get on a plane and show up to somebody's wedding, show up to their birthday party. Bring your body. Meet with people. By the way, people who know me will understand how unnatural this is for me. I'm not saying this because I like to hang out with people. I actually find it really, really exhausting to hang out with people. I'm extremely introverted. And that's why I've had to learn this as one of the big lessons in this lifetime is bring the body. Another thing, a project that I got involved in, most of my success as a teacher has been virtual platforms, online. But precisely because of this idea, I bought a property, which I didn't have to do. I could have gone completely virtual. I don't have to be brick and mortar, but I actually bought a property last year, which we're in the middle of construction. It's in Queens, New York, and it's going to be, it's not a large facility, it's small, about 1,300 square feet. But the point is to have a physical place to get together and to study and to meet and to have discussions. So one of the things, the basement is going to be my video production facility. So
I'll have to come check it out when I'm in Queens.
you definitely, when you come to Queens, you'll check it out. I'm scanning all your equipment right now and making my wish list. But
I got it all written down. I'll
have it written down. Excellent. Okay, I'll give it to my AV guy. But physical places, showing up to physical places, so important, because otherwise it's like, why is my soul in a body? What's the point? What's the point of being a soul in a body? So bring your body to places where you can be of service, where you can make a contribution, where your presence will be appreciated. Probably the most important place to bring your body where your presence will be appreciated is the dinner table with your family. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing, same point, but the other thing you can do to make good use of your embodiment is to really understand how spiritually powerful charity is. Because money is material. Even if it's not actual currency or assets, even if it's just like moving numbers from one computer to another, but it procures material resources. You earn it through exertion of your body, even if you're not a manual laborer, but you're burning calories while you're working, right? So when you take that and you turn it into charity, you're converting it from material to spiritual, so to speak, and you're making good use of your embodiment. The souls in heaven can't give charity. So souls and bodies can give charity. Also, another thing, and we mentioned Maimonides, and interesting, the 8 levels of giving. There's another thing Maimonides says, which is the importance of repeated acts of charity. And what that means is, a lot of people don't know this, if you can give in one lump sum, or you can give in installments, it's actually better to give in installments. Now, yeah, it's a counterintuitive. Obviously, if the recipient needs it now, if it's like an urgent matter, so it's better to give it all at once. But I'm saying, let's say somebody's making 10 million a year, they're giving away $1 million a year as a tithe is 10%. So it would actually be better, instead of one lump sum a year, to ritualize it, to make it a regimen, and have as part of your day, every day, to have to click, even if it's a click, but it's a physical movement, like physical exercise, and have to, with $1 million divided by 365, whatever, it's $33,000. And is that what it is? And every day have to, click and wire that 33,000 a day. Probably more like 30,000. The repeated act, the physicalized expression of it, integrates the soul with the body, gives peace to the soul within the body. So these things, really, they will clear up a lot of the existential angst that may be running in the background that we don't even realize we're feeling. But when you're using your body repeatedly and regularly for a spiritual purpose. It's very healing. This is semi-related, but in the past few years, therapy has shifted a lot from like talk therapy to more somatic therapy, where we realize not everything is in the world of abstraction and the world of ideas. Some things are, like they say, your issues are in your tissues, right? A lot of it is physical. So a lot of our spiritual healing is through physical behavior, physical actions, physically showing up, physical allotment of physical or material resources.
I felt this. I've spoken about this. I've never articulated it the way that you just have. And I don't have an expertise in charity, so I would never even comment on that. But I felt in terms of relationship building after COVID, it just felt like relationships were not as real as they were before. And I couldn't put a finger on it outside of the fact that we just don't shake hands and we just don't sit down with each other anymore. That's really it.
Because we're not brains in jars on a shelf.
But people are trying to operate like they are.
And we're suffering for it.
I feel we didn't even talk about loneliness, but that's another epidemic that I think people are.
It's all intertwined.
Yeah. And now we have Zoom everything. And we felt fatigued on Zoom for a variety of reasons. And then because we felt fatigued on Zoom, then we defaulted to email and text and Slack. And we stopped even seeing each other. Now we're trying to do deals just via text or build relations via text. And I think people are lonely.
I want to make sure everyone knows, by the way, in case they think I'm a social butterfly, and that's why I'm like telling everybody to get together in actual meet space. I want you to know, I said it up before, I'll say it again. I'm painfully introverted. I get drained by being in a location with many people. Like just the energy of bodies in a room exhausts me. So I don't gravitate toward this naturally at all, but I've come to realize increasingly how essential it is to our spiritual health, and then it trickles down to all our other levels of health. So it's not like I'm the guy who loves to go physically show up places, but we have to. If your soul's in a body, you got to bring the body. Otherwise, like, what did you come down here for?
I think that if people actually take this insight to heart and spend, we're not talking about, social butterfly going to a party. I mean, sometimes it's necessary, or going to a networking event. But if it's possible to sit down and have a conversation, or if you're in the same city, as opposed to, picking up the phone, go for a coffee, it's without understanding the spiritual component, is very therapeutic. It's just very therapeutic, and it builds real relationships. I've never been able to build a relationship virtually, and I've hired a lot of people. I can never build a relationship, a true relationship that has been something outside of just a transaction. And even then, it's an awkward experience.
I'll tell you, the people that I know who have been most successful in relationships, meaning they know the most amount of people in a substantial way, where their relationships actually, to me, one of the biggest metrics for determining the success of a relationship is how many other people are benefited by that relationship. So I'm thinking about people I know who, for instance, network with a lot of people to cause a lot of good to happen in the world, which ends up benefiting tons of people. All of the top 3-4 people I'm thinking of in my mind right now are incredibly good at showing up at places. That means someone has a life cycle event. You get on a plane to go to show up at somebody's birthday party for an hour, and you get on a plane and go right back home. It seems silly. Why should we need that? Send them a text. There's something about the physical presence that is so beyond what we fathom, so much more powerful than what we can even imagine.
You mentioned that you were looking into this because people are stressed, for lack of a better word, about being the souls in bodies. Why do people get stressed about this?
Well, I think the better question is why wouldn't someone get stressed about it? Like, it's not normal for a soul to be in a body. It's a weird condition. But the reality is most people aren't stressed by it. Most people don't even think about it, and they have their life and they go through life and everything's fine. Then there are the hypersensitive individuals. You mentioned neurodivergent minds. So there are different labels that are in fashion to use for it. I'm not particularly married to any of these terms because I don't speak about it from a clinical perspective anyway. But there are certain sensitive individuals who are awake to the fact that it's weird to be in a body. And these people tend to be prone to addiction because they have this constant existential discomfort, which needs to be dealt with somehow. Or these are people who are often very intense with, they get involved in behaviors or in enterprises where they just completely immerse themselves beyond any healthy point where it's really clearly just self-numbing. And a lot of these people are what society deems to be successful, so that it's very much reinforced. You're being cheered on for essentially indulging your addiction. And I think for a lot of these people, it's necessary to get to a quiet place and to just examine, like, who am I? What am I? How uncomfortable am I without any of these trappings, without the brand, the name, the business, the bank account, the identity that I built around me? Like, who am I when my soul? Who is my soul? And what did this soul come to this world to accomplish? And these questions are questions that are important for everyone to ask, but I think there are certain types of people, highly sensitive people, who are forced to ask it.
Is there, if somebody's listening to this and has never thought about this concept for the first time, I don't want to introduce a concept and not leave them with some sort of comfort or some sort of solace or some insight. I don't even know the right question to ask, but if somebody is just wrestling with this concept for the first time, having this crisis, for example, what would be something you'd like to leave them with?
First of all, you're okay. The fact that you're here in this body, in this lifetime, under these conditions, was not meant to torture you. A loving and all-knowing God put you exactly where you are needed. And life may never be comfortable. I think that's one of the lies that we try to sell. It's like, life can be comfortable. For some of us, no, life will never be comfortable, but it can be profoundly meaningful. And the way to find that meaning is so simple. Do not go searching. The meaning of your life is not on the other side of the world. Open your eyes. Look at who you are now and the gifts that you've been given and the resources and the opportunities that you have in your life now. And ask yourself how to best use that for the good of others. How to maximize using that to benefit people other than yourself. That's your meaning. That's your meaning.
No, I love it. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about your work, what you do? Is there anything else that you have focused on that you want to just tell people to go check out?
Personally, I mean, I thank God I do pretty well on social media, but to me, that's appetizers. That's finger food. The serious content is the long form content. So I would say check me out on YouTube and find the long lectures, the hour and a half, 2-hour lectures. And if you're relating to the stuff that I'm talking about, go take a longer journey with me where I can actually develop a concept. I mean, here we were able to develop many concepts because I felt very much that we're just being present here and there's no agenda which is great.
I appreciate the conversation. That was really good. I enjoyed that a lot. I really enjoyed that a lot. At the end of the day, I think that maybe there is a selfish component of this where I just like to learn about things that I find interesting. I think the useful and helpful.
It definitely could be beneficial to you and I, but I think it's also beneficial to others, which is, that's why the cameras are running, because we could sit here without the cameras, but I think there is an intention that both of us have that maybe something we've experienced or an experience that we've had insight from may make somebody else's life a little better. Or like, I love what part of your story is, that you didn't have to have a crisis, that you learned from other people's crises. So I love that concept of people being able to learn from somebody else's experience.
That's the reason why I built this podcast.
Yeah, it seems like it. Life's always going to be a struggle, but instead of struggling on a lower level, like learn what you can learn from what other people already learned, and then struggle on a higher level. Like that's always going to be a struggle.
There will always be something, but I agree. I think that most people could dig themselves out of whatever extremely stressful environment they're in right now and live a relatively good life. And I mean, you can define good by different terms. I'm not talking about everybody making 100 million or $1 billion. I'm saying you can live a less worrisome, slightly less struggle life. And I think that's really the goal. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to be comfortable. It doesn't take much to support your family. It doesn't take much to not stress about rent or mortgage payment or putting food on the table. Because I'm very well aware that those are things that people deal with. The last question I like to ask, you always look like you're about to say something else. I never want to interrupt you.
My mind is always racing. But we'll change the subject, and another thought will come in. So I'm not too worried about.
No. Well, you have to get up. You have to get up to Parkland. So one day in the future, God willing, we'll do another.
That'll be great.
The last question I always like to ask, and I used to ask, what would you tell like a lesson you tell your younger self? But then I actually stopped asking that. And the reason why I stopped asking is because I think some people understood that they were actually quite happy with how their life turned out. And they realized that all the hills and valleys and the roller coaster ride has led them to where they're at now. So they didn't want to tell their younger self anything at all, which is an interesting retort to that question. So then I changed it, and I want to ask, what would be a lesson that you want to leave your children with? Because they will go down a different path.
Yeah. Well, I hope that my answer to this question is not only what I want to leave my children with, I hope this is what they're getting from me. I guess I could call them and ask them and see if this is what they got from me. I want them to know that it's a privilege to be here in this world. You ever heard of Helm?
No, I don't know this.
It's a town in Poland, but it's famous because there's a whole genre of Jewish jokes and Jewish stories about the people of Helm. Yeah, basically they're a town of simpletons who thought that they were intellectuals. So there's a lot of jokes about their sophistry. So there's an old Helm joke about one Helmite says to the other, he says, based on how difficult life is, sometimes I think it would have been better never to have been born. And the other Helmite says to the first one, he says, yeah, true, but how many guys do you know who are actually that lucky? 1 out of 100? Okay. So you got the joke. Most people don't get this joke. How many guys do you know who were never born? Right? Yeah. I don't know any guy. I don't know anyone who's never born. Okay. So you were sent.
Such a nerdy joke.
Such a nerd. So you were sent to this world not to be tortured and also not to seek pleasure. You were sent to this world because something was required that only you could contribute. And that's what life is about. It's about serving that purpose here in our bodies in this world.